Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to another weekly reading wrap up. I think this is week 10 of 2022. I should have written it in my book, but either. So we're going to dive right into the reading this week. I read or reread 11 books this week and I'm very excited to talk to them about you. If I'm, some of you who are new, maybe you haven't seen this location. This is my bedroom. There's more bookshelves. I just decided to change it up today because I kind of wanted to sit on my bed instead of the floor today. So that's what's happening. Yeah, that's really the only reason. Also, I'm wearing the book Refuge sweater, shirt, whatever. It's super comfortable. Yeah, that's it. I'm trying to make sure that I'm not missing anything, but I just want to dive into these because I read some interesting books this week. So let's go. All right, let's go. The first book that I read this week was called Hitman, and this is by Hallman and Isabella Starling. This was actually a book that was already on my TBR after I had read two other books in the Heaven and Hell / Purgatory series. This is a series of standalones that all revolve around a certain sex club that involves like each of these stories. So I've read one by Sam Mariano and one by Adelaide Forrest. And this one, I have read this pairing before. I've read one of their like taboo romances, and this one definitely has some aspects of this. So this was a bit of a quickie book. Like it was just a little bit longer than a novella maybe, and it was definitely dark. It has mafia aspects. It's taboo, which I'll talk about in a second. Enemies to lovers, kind of a serial killer. He is a hitman for the mob, so he gets his jobs that he has to do, and he has some very interesting kinks. The hero's name is Lark, and our heroine's name is Monroe, and they meet because she is bartending at the club, and she gets picked to, the hero wants to fuck her, so he asks her to get a room with him, and she's like, I don't do that, I only work the bar. And he knows that there are different dynamics at play in this club, and because of who he is, he basically like can have whatever he wants. So he assumes that she should know that, and he has her come with him. She does a dance for him, he has her blow him, and he pays her and leaves. He does not know that she is literally pretending that this is the first, like she's not pretending that this is the first time she's ever done that. And he ends up becoming obsessed with her, and he ends up wanting her, and he ends up kidnapping her and taking her and tying her to his bed, basically. So yeah, this becomes a bit of a kidnapping situation. There's also some very interesting kinks at play. If you haven't guessed, there is some non-con, there is some sexual assault happening between this couple. There is also some dubious consent that comes along because of that. And the biggest one is that our hero's kink, which he has only previously done with consenting partners, which you should, is he's a somnophiliac. And if you don't know, that means you like to have sex with people who are passed out or asleep. And so there is, the first time this happens in the book, he literally drugs her tea so that he can rape her in her sleep. So yep, that happens. There are more occurrences in this book where she has previously approved, and there's one where instead she has a drug where she is awake but can't move so that she can feel what he's doing to her. And then there's a case where they both do, I think they do like ecstasy together. So there's a lot of drug use in this book, and that honestly was a big issue for me. I don't like reading about drug use, even recreationally. It's just a trigger for me. Drugs are an issue for me in books. This was not the most disturbing thing that I've ever read, even though it kind of was. It's part of the Black Heart romance series, so I knew kind of what I was getting into with it because I have read some other books in this series, and both of them included rape in them. So just know that if you're picking this up. This character also wasn't as charismatic as like the other ones I'd read. So I don't know, that played part of it for me. So I gave this one 3 stars, but this was a 5 on the spice scale because it had all the things that put it up there. You know, there's sex in pretty much every chapter. This was basically erotica. There is IHEA, but it was a close thing. Then I read Praise by Sara Cate, and I know that I had announced this to some people that this was coming out already. I was off by a week. This book comes out on the 17th, but you can pre-order it now, and I loved this book. This is the like 3rd or 4th book by Sara Cate that I've read. I've read a few, and this one is my favorite. Absolutely. So I read an arc of this. This is a kind of taboo age gap, but taboo in a different way than the other book I just read. So this is a ex's dad scenario. So our heroine is 21. She's just broken up with her boyfriend and they need to move out of their apartment. And she has to work. She has a mom and a little sister, and her work helps like provide kind of like the extra things for her family. So she has some odd, like, you know, different jobs that she does to, again, like kind of help for the extras. You know, she's not paying the rent or the mortgage or anything, but her mom, like, and dad are divorced, and her dad is not very helpful for their family situation. So anyway, point being, she needs to get her security deposit back, and when she goes to get it, her boyfriend is like, you missed it. And she's like, I'm sorry, I had to work. And he's like, well, you missed it, so it was sent to my dad, so you're gonna have to go get your half from my dad. And she's like, why do I have to do it? You go get it from your dad. And he's like, you know I don't talk to my dad, just go fucking get it, Charlie, okay? So she's like, fine. So backstory about the dad. So the dad, he's 40 years old. So yes, that kind of makes, you know, he had his kid when he was like 18 and is no longer with the mother. He actually is just opening a sex club with his friends. They have this club where you can, there's an app that kind of goes with it. So you can find your perfect match. A dom can find a submissive who's into the same things as them. It's basically like Tinder for kinky things. And then their club has different access memberships and everything. So this club, they've been working on this project for a few years together. There's 4 owners, and Emerson is kind of the mastermind behind it all. And then everyone else has kind of like what they provide to it as well. And we are actually getting a full series about all of them, and I'm very excited about that. I'll bring that around in a second, because I'm very intrigued by this series. So anyway, Charlie, so Emerson, he likes submissives. He's a dom, and he very much likes service submissives. So that doesn't always have to be a sexual situation, but it's having a submissive who's just kind of there as like a comfort to him in a lot of ways. Obviously there's kinky things too, but he likes, like when he's having his business meetings or he's having a stressful day, he likes to have his submissive with him where he can be like petting her head or, you know, talking to her, and he likes to give praise. So if she is a good girl and does everything he wants, then she gets rewarded with, if it's not sexual, the praise that he gives her, or if it is sexual, then sexual favors. So that's the setup. He has recently been trying out the app themselves, you know, so his colleagues, they've been working on perfecting the app so that he's been trying it out and trying to find like the right submissives for him, and it hasn't been working. And so just before, you know, just a day before our heroine shows up, the hero had an unsuccessful situation with a submissive who is more of a brat, and he's like, I don't really like brats. And so he's like, I'm going to take a break. We're going to focus on opening it or whatever. So cue Charlie showing up the next day. She looks like his type. And when his friend opens the door, because his friend, who is also one of the owners, she's working as his, like, she's helping be his assistant right now. He works out of his home. She thinks, the Maggie, I think is her name, the friend thinks that this is another submissive that got sent home. She's like, oh my God, you're perfect. You're exactly his type. And she's like, okay, I'm just here for the money. And Maggie's like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. Go on into his study and wait for him there. And she's like, okay. So she goes in and Maggie's like, you might want to be waiting on your knees. He likes that. And Charlie's just like, what? Why do I need to get on my knees? Anyway, so Emerson walks in and he's like, why are you not waiting on your knees? Get on your knees. And she's like, I'm here for the money. And he's like, I bet you are. So you got to do things my way. Get on your knees. So but she's feeling things when he orders her to do it. She gets down on her knees and he walks over and he's looking at her face and he's like, wow, I was not expecting anyone today, but you're perfect. And she's like, I'm so confused. I'm just here to pick up my check. And he's like, oh, don't worry. We'll get there. And then finally it comes out that she's like, what does this have to do with the rent check? And he's like, what? And so he's super embarrassed and he like picks her up and he's like, why didn't you say anything? And she's like, I don't know, I was just very confused and I just did what you told me. And he's kind of like, so she explains who he is. And the thing is, Emerson hasn't been speaking with his son because his son knows about the sex club and does not approve of it and thinks it's gross and thinks his dad is this like dirty old man. And he was hoping that his son was going to have to come and ask for the money. And so he only gives Charlie her half of the money. And then she gets the idea to kind of like blackmail him a little bit. Not really hard, because he's like, please don't tell my son what happened. And she's like, well, I do see him sometimes. And so he ends up paying her off, but he also gives her his phone number. And so he gives her a large amount of money and then she leaves. And the next day he comes and finds her and asks her if she would be his secretary. Now, normally his secretaries are his submissives. Like, that's what that role is to him. But he wants her to have that role so that he has a chance of seeing his son again. So this is a scenario we're set in. I know that was a lot of setup to whatever. But the more that she's around his business and around him, the more she starts feeling that maybe submission is something she would be good at, something that she would enjoy. And he's like, yeah, but I can't be the one to give that to you. Like, I can't be with my son's ex. Like, you're 21. Like, I can't. And the chemistry between them just will not be denied. And I loved this. I love the praise kink. Like, absolutely, absolutely do. And there was so much beautiful stuff and so many like affirmations that he gives her. And it's so beautiful. So I gave that one 5 stars. And it was also a 4.5 on the spice scale for me. So I loved that one. Trigger warnings are going to be degradation and praise, obviously. And then there is also a small trigger warning for transphobia in here because our heroine has a trans girl sister, which is part of the reason why her parents are not together anymore, because her father did not like it. So it is not a big focus of the book, but I actually liked that. I liked that it was just there and everyone's okay with it. But the dad does appear at certain times. And so there's a little bit of it. So just want to say that. And then, oh yeah, I was going to mention, yeah, there's going to be 4 books in this series about the owners. And we see the son, you know, her ex / his son, who is a real jerk for a lot of the book. But he does have like a very nice character arc. I don't want to spoil it totally. However, when you look up the 4 books that will be in this series, one of them says that it's going to be a best friend's son romance. So it's going to be an older woman. And I think that Maggie might end up being with the son. And that would be very interesting because he's very much like against this sex club in this book. And I think that it would be very cool to see him have a change of heart. So moving on, we're talking too long. Then I read Simply Sexual by Cate Pearce. This was a viewer recommendation. This series is also on Kindle Unlimited. This is a historical romance that it's basically historical erotic romance, okay? There is a romance. This is a marriage of convenience. It has a hero who was previously a sex slave, so know that. His name is Val, and he's going to marry into this family, and he's supposed to marry the youngest daughter, but the oldest daughter, who's 25, she's very attracted to him. She actually catches him sleeping with a maid in the beginning. And she's like, you're not going to cheat on my sister. Like, my sister deserves better than that. And he's like, no, once I'm married, you know, I want I have a very healthy sexual appetite, and I don't think your sister is going to be able to fulfill it. So it's very like, you're kind of like, wow, you're an asshole. But they have this amazing chemistry. And he tells her, he's like, you know, if I was with someone like you, who's curious and open and interested in some of the things I am, I would be faithful, because that would be kind of amazing. Like, literally, that's a setup. And so between him and her, they convince her father to let her marry him instead. There's a lot of baggage going on. Our hero has a lot of trauma. There were some very interesting scenes in this. So this had like some BDSM, kinky type stuff. There was, marriage of convenience. And then some of the like kink / like trigger warnings were, there's sexual trauma in his past. He was assaulted. He was forced to be a sex slave. He was forced into some male-male situations and threesomes that he did not want to be in. And we do some sexual healing in those situations. So there is a threesome that happens a couple times in this book. There's an FFM one and there's an MMF one. And they were pretty hot. And they like I said, they involved like sexual healing in that aspect. There was voyeurism was one of the kinks, and yeah, there was some fun bondage and like piercings and clamps, and there's a lot of like toys used, and in historicals I love that even more when that happens. Okay, then one of my books from my stack here, I read Accidentally Compromising the Duke. This one's going to be shiny, so we'll hold it. This was a book that I've been wanting to read for a while. I've been wanting to read more of Stacy Reid. I will put this down and put up a picture because it's shiny. I got this book in the Target sale when they had their buy two, get one free. And yeah, I've been wanting to read it. So I listened to the audiobook for this one. It was a pretty quick read. This one is about Adeline, who her father's about to force her into a marriage with a man who tried to sexually assault her. She's a very beautiful woman, and there's this creepy guy who tried to assault her. And when she told her dad about it, her dad, he didn't necessarily blame her. Like, it wasn't a thing of like, this is completely your fault. But he kind of did that, and he said, to save your reputation, you need to marry this guy now. He is a, like, I don't know if he's a Viscount or, like, what he is, but he has a title, and he's like, you need this man to marry you, or you won't be good. Meanwhile, she has someone else who she really likes, who he isn't titled, but he really cares about her, and he's actually asked for her hand multiple times, and her father has said no because he doesn't have enough to offer. So there's this house party happening, and Adeline's plan, with like the help of her friend, is she is planning to sneak into this man's room and be compromised, and then hope that her father like makes them marry each other. However, her best friend Evie is at the same time being told that she needs to marry Edmund, who is the Duke. And Edmund is a single dad. He is a man who's been celibate for many years. His wife died. People accuse him of killing his wife. And to a certain respect, he agrees with that. We'll get into why he thinks he killed his wife, but... And her friend does not want to marry him because she kind of likes someone else. So her friend is supposed to help Adeline sneak in to the man's room that she wants to. Her friend tells her the wrong room. Her friend tells her Edmund's room. And so she sneaks into Edmund's room and climbs into his bed. And Edmund thinks this is a dream. He hasn't had sex in years. He's been celibate. And he's so like turned on by this woman who is just so like bold and sweet. And then she realizes she's kissing the wrong person, and she like jumps out of bed, and it's too late because they get caught. And Edmund decides right in the moment, he's like, well, I'm going to rescue this woman's reputation. I need a wife anyway. Yeah, this one might be a little more difficult because he's planning to stay celibate and he's very attracted to her. But he's like, we'll make it work. It'll be fine. She does not want to marry him. And she really puts up a stink about it. But she realizes she feels so betrayed by her friend that her friend would sacrifice her happiness that way to get her out of the situation. You know, it's I mean, it really is. It's a pretty big betrayal if things weren't going to work out the way they were. Because romance. So they end up getting married. And our hero, he is a single parent. He's a widower. And this man has PTSD from the loss of his wife in childbirth. And that's a big plot point. So I know I kind of just spoiled that. But they're also the trigger warnings. Because there's loss of a spouse and loss of a child. And it was very traumatic. And our hero believes that he's responsible. Not only because his wife straight up said that to him when she is like dying in agony, but he's the one who wanted another child. He wanted an heir, and he believes that it's his fault because his wife kept trying to give him one. And so he blames himself. So he does not want Adeline to get pregnant at all. So that's the thing with this one. I gave this book 4.5 stars. I have seen this trauma before. I've seen this scenario before. But what I really loved was the heroine. And I loved the chemistry these two had together. And I loved how she was with his children. And there was just so much that endeared me to this book. And when the conflict comes, which we all see coming a mile away, we know what it's going to be. The hero is stubborn about it. But the grovel is very beautiful. Like, oh, the grovel had me tearing up. It had my eyes, and it was a thing. It was a thing. So yeah, the trigger warnings for this were loss of a spouse and a child, and also sexual assault for heroine, for what had happened to her. And yeah, I gave this 4.5 stars, and it was a 3 on the spice rating. It would have probably even been higher, but like the spice is very delayed because he's very much like, I'm going to be celibate. So then I finally finished Malady by Trisha Wolfe. I had an arc for this book. This book is already out. It wasn't supposed to come out until March, but she had released it early because some authors are awesome like that. And so her arc reviewer, she's like, don't worry, like, take your time. You still have like a few weeks. Please just try to get it done by this time. And was it in last week's? It might have been 2 weeks ago because I think I read it in February. I read Cruel and it didn't vibe with me. And this one didn't really either, but I understand why it's awesome. I fully appreciate how great Trisha Wolfe's writing is. And if you like suspense or you like thrillers or mysteries or serial killer stuff, this duet is going to be great for you. It does connect with the Madly Darkly duet, which was about London and Grayson. This book connects quite directly with it. In fact, they show up in this duet. So Blakely is a female psychopath, and we learn a lot about what's going on with her in the first one. And our hero, Alex, lost his twin sister to a serial killer. And so his life's mission is to cure psychopathy through torture and like mind altering means. And that's a lot of what went on in the first book. And in the second one, our hero has went through a little bit of the torture that he has put on, and now he wants to find Blakely again and like win her back to him. And there's other things going on, but this duet is not for me. I'm not the right person for this. And I wanted to give Trisha Wolfe another try because I read one of her mafia books and I really loved it. This one just like, I shouldn't have tried with this duet. I still gave it 4 stars because I don't want to blame this duet and the author because her writing is so good. It just wasn't for me. The type of psychopath that our heroine is, the type of serial killing in this, it's not the kind I enjoy, which I know sounds fucked up, but y'all are probably not your first day to this channel, so you know how things are for me. And it just didn't vibe with me. But this one had more spice in it. It had some spicy spice, some very like dangerous sexual situations. Trigger warnings were violence, killing, there was torture, and body modification, done not in a nice way. And for me, this was just not very romantic. Is my biggest issue. Okay, then I switched to the complete end of the spectrum and read a light, fun book. I read Featherbed by Annabeth Albert. This was a viewer recommendation, as well as I've been reading some Annabeth Albert. I've read, I think this is the 5th book by her I've read at this point. She writes gay romance pretty much exclusively, at least that I've seen. And this is an age gap that I messed up that part of it. But anyway, this is an age gap. I listened to the audiobook of this one. It's also on Kindle Unlimited, and it's the first in the Vino and Veritas series, which I believe is done under Serena Bowen's like publishing group, I think, her self-publishing group. And this is a kind of friends to lovers. It's like, first it's like bad first impressions, but like they become friends to lovers. And our one hero, Harrison, he is in his early 40s, and his mother is retiring to this small town and opening a bookstore and wine bar. And he goes to stay with her to help. He's a lawyer. He kind of believes he's living on a time clock because both his grandfather and father died in their 40s, and he kind of feels like that's going to happen to him too, even though he's trying to live a super healthy life and all these things. Finn is like 7 years younger than him, and he is a chicken farmer, and it's kind of adorable. He's a chicken farmer, and they both meet because they're in this small town, and Harrison's mother is very interested in the chickens and the farming, and it's just cute. This is only like 200 pages. It was adorable. It was very sexy. I love the consent conversations. Annabeth Albert just writes gay romance in the sweetest way. Like, there are a few gay romances I read that just give me such warm fuzzies, and this author is one of them. There are some where I like it to be just as alpha and dirty as it can get, and then there's ones like this where they're just so sweet, it like hurts your teeth, and that was this. So I gave this 4 stars, and the spice rating was about a 3. Because there was some fun, dirty stuff. Trigger warnings were possible illness, because again, our hero is very worried about illness all the time. And then loss of a parent. Both of the heroes have lost their fathers, and so they bond over that. But there's some grief stuff happening. Then we had a reread of Savage Lover by Sophie Lark, because if you've seen my Instagram story, I'm actually reading The Savage right now. I finally got it. But on like Thursday this week, or Wednesday last week, I knew that I would be getting it soon because it comes out on the 16th. And I had only read this one once because it was not my favorite of hers. I just feel like it didn't fit in the series the same way. It was very much removed more from the mafia side of things. But I want to try it again because I really love Sabrina, and Nero is her dad, and Camille is a woman. Like, they went to school together. Yes, Camille is a woman. They went to school together. It's like 6 or 7 years after school. Nero is, I don't know, still kind of like living like a child in a lot of ways, even though he's this big badass. Like, his father is a mafia boss. He is only involved with that minimally, but he is involved in some other criminal activities. And Camille, her younger brother, gets in trouble selling some drugs, and she takes the fall for him. And when she takes the fall for him, she gets rounded into being an informant. And so she gets sent back to her high school crew, who is, a lot of them still just hanging around, doing drugs, having parties, all that jazz. And she's supposed to try to like sell to them and find out info to keep her and her brother out of jail, basically. Also, she has, her father is ill, so she is doing most of his work at her family auto body shop as well. So her and Nero, they start running into each other again because now they're kind of in the same areas. They both are very interested in cars. She just thinks he's a cocky asshole, and he thinks she is just way too uptight, and they end up having kind of these very interesting interactions with each other. And yeah, so again, not my favorite of Sophie's. I know for some people this is like their favorite one. Everyone has their own favorite Sophie Lark. That's what's amazing. I did appreciate this book a lot more this time. I believe, and I still believe, that this book, if you are binging her books, like if you are reading The Brutal Birthright and you read Cruel Prince, Stolen Heir, and then you get to Savage Lover, this book just doesn't hit you the way that Stolen Heir does. That book is serious. That book is a very intense, passionate, enemies to lovers, it's very, you know, this Beauty and the Beast is very beautiful. And then we get Nero, who is just very devil may care, sleep with all the women I want, drive fast cars, spend my money, do whatever I want. And Camille has a lot of burdens, you know? And so this book just doesn't hit with the same like emotional weight to me as a previous book does, or as the book after it does, which also is a very heavy story. So this one just doesn't like hit me the way that I would want it to. However, again, this time around, I wasn't reading this after just reading Miko and Nessa's book, and I was able to appreciate it a lot more. This book has a big heist that happens at the end, and I just really love Camille and her family. And I really was trying to pick up on like more about Camille because I'm more familiar with Nero, but I wanted to pick up more about Camille to see which parts of Camille I could see in Sabrina, because the parts of Nero are very obvious, but I wanted to see the parts of Camille. And I'm glad that I did, because again, I'm currently reading The Savage, and I'm glad that I reread this. So this time around, I upped my rating to a 4-star. I'd only given it 3 stars last time, and it has like a 2.5 on the spice. This is one of the least spicy ones in the series, that I think, which is fine. It's fine. It's still very like, Nero is very much about Camille when it's happening, which is great. So the trigger warning for this one is going to be the parental illness, probably, because there's some serious things going on with that. Then I read Reece by Stasia Black. I was very excited to read this book. So this series is called Stud Ranch, and I read it a very long time ago. Sorry, my dad decided to call in the middle of filming. That happens on Saturdays. My dad, he hasn't quite figured out the right time to call me yet. Anyway, sidetrack. So, the Stud Ranch series, I first read a long time ago, like 2+ years ago probably, when I was first getting into like BDSM books, because specifically the first book in the series has a kind of unique like dynamic play that's going on. It's a bit of a Beauty and the Beast kind of situation. And I hadn't read anything like that before, and it was recommended to me. The rest in the series have different scenarios. They all usually have like a kink in them, but they're not like full on like that one was. Anyway, so at the time there's only 3 books out in that series, but that was like 2 years ago. And one of the things I do like to do, because this happens, because I'm not following every author that I've ever read, you know, I'm just not. It would be impossible. You know how many books I read. Periodically, I will go through my list of books that I loved, and I'll look up the author to see. And when I did, I saw that there was 2 new books out in the Stud Ranch series, Reece and Jeremiah, and they're about twin brothers who I don't remember them from the previous books, but I know that they work for the hero who's like, he like owns all the land and everything. And now he's like splitting off, and he's bought some other areas of land. And so he sends Reece and Jeremiah to be the foreman and to like run this ranch. And there's also a woman named Ruth who it was previously her family's land, and she bought it, or I mean they bought it, but she still is living there. Then we have our heroine, Penelope, who becomes Charlie, who is in a very abusive relationship, and she has been for about 10 years. She has been in just hell. She has been married to a man who, he used to be her professor. He literally targeted her and wooed her and won her over, married her, and then made her his slave, basically. When she tried to escape, he had her institutionalized. He had her drugged because she had tried to kill herself at one point to escape. He forces her to be on birth control, and when she accidentally gets pregnant, he beats her until she loses the child. So we're just laying all of that on the table, that there are severe trigger warnings in this book. And she was always planning to try to get away. Like, she has never stopped wanting to get away. and she holds so much guilt that she wasn't able to escape before the loss of her child. She's very traumatized by this. But the beginning of this book is the day of her escape. She's been planning it for a while. She thinks she has it all down, and she makes a go of it. Things go awry, and she ends up stranded with no money and is hitchhiking her way across the country. She's literally went all these different places to try to lose the trail, and she ends up on the land of this ranch. And Reece happens to be birthing a cow, and she stumbles across the land, and he's like, I need help. And she helps him birth this cow, which I was telling Krista while I was reading this that, like, this gave me serious flashbacks, and not in a bad way. I grew up on a farm. My father worked with cows. He worked on a dairy farm, as well as we had our own cows. Literally, the scenario described in this book of helping the cow birth a overly large calf, I have helped with it. The smells and the sounds were very visceral for me because I've lived this before. There was a lot of parts of this book that I've lived before, the good and the bad in it. And so for that part, this was oddly nostalgic for growing up on a farm in a lot of ways. The author did. I mean, I feel like Stasia either grew up on a farm or she did really good research, because I felt it. And through situations, our heroine ends up becoming like a housekeeper and ranch hand here. They end up allowing her to stay there, and things that she was once forced to do, like be the housekeeper and cook for, you know, her husband, she's now getting paid to do them and doing them for people who appreciate her and are thankful to have her there. And her and Reece end up having a sexual relationship where they role play. So that's kind of the kink in this one, is that they role play different scenarios. So one of them will come up and they'll be like, do you want to play tonight? And they'll come up with a scenario and do it. Very fun with that. So the tropes in this are kind of like, this is forced proximity because they're staying on the ranch. There's the kinky dynamic play a little bit. And then this is on KU. And then, yeah, I've said most of the triggers. There's domestic abuse, loss of pregnancy, and then there is an animal death. And this is the other thing where, like, I've lived through this too. There's a scenario in this one where they're not able to save a calf one time, and it reminds her of the death of her child, you know, when she was forced to miscarry her child. So that was, that was extremely triggering, like, honest to goodness, it really was. So just want to put that out there. So I was happy to be back in this series. This book was very chaotic and was taking on some very heavy topics, one after the other. And I feel like our heroine, yes, she's having nightmares. She's trying to deal with these things. But also I feel like we didn't talk through them enough. And then the way that things wrapped up with her husband was so ridiculous. I had to remember that I remember these books being ridiculous, because I remember there also being a wacky situation in another one. But it's been so long that I forgot. So I gave this 3.5 stars, and it's 3.5 on the spice scale. I did not hate it, but I was just like, what the fuck? Then I read Scared to Love by Siobhan Davis. Now, if you saw last week, you'll know that this is the book that I've been wanting to read, because I read Condemned to Love and Forbidden to Love because I wanted to read Scared to Love. But the author at the beginning of the book said, these books heavily connect with each other. Please start with the first one. And I did. And I loved Condemned to Love. I gave it 5 stars. Forbidden to Love, I did not like as much. It was very much like a time slip, and not in a way that I like, which I very rarely like time slip. I don't. And the hero and the heroine are barely together in that book at all. And then this one, which I was so excited to read, because it's an older woman. It's a widowed mom. She has 2 kids, and it's a younger mafia man. This heroine was also in an extremely abusive relationship where her husband would rape her and beat her and pulverize her basically and then get her plastic surgery so you couldn't tell what he'd done to her. And he terrorized her. He would fuck other people in front of her. He would make her fuck other people, like women in front of him, like so many horrible things. And her family never knew about it. In a previous book, like, he's dead. And one of her brother-in-law's soldiers, Alesso, he is interested in her, and they become very good friends. So this is very much a friends to lovers romance. Also, he's kind of her bodyguard because her brother-in-law is like assigned him to her, and he's so great with her kids. Like, this was romantic in a lot of ways, and things went very slowly between them. This was definitely a slow burn. Our heroine has a lot of trauma to get through. Obviously, she's never had a pleasurable experience with a man because she was a virgin when she married her husband. But yeah, this is a mafia age gap. The woman is older. And my biggest issues with it were that it didn't feel like a mafia book at all. Like, our hero was so gentle and kind, which I know this woman, she deserved that. Like, she deserved to have a man as sweet to her as Alesso. But the scenario that was painted to me with this younger man pursuing this older woman with 2 kids who's very broken, it didn't give me the feels that I wanted to get. And that might just be me. Like, I feel like if you don't love mafia as much as me, this is a really beautiful, like, you know, woman being shown what love is again. And the way that the hero is with her kids, like, it's really beautiful. But it just was not what I was wanting. And especially after being disappointed by book 2, this one just, like, it didn't work for me at all. So, yeah, I gave this one 3.5 stars. And it was a 2 on the spice scale for me. So, yeah. Then I got to read a very anticipated book, and that is Rewriting the Stars by Claire Kingsley. So, if for some reason you don't know, which why would you? I read these books last summer, the first 5 books in this series. This is about the Bailey brothers. This is the biggest one, by the way. And it is about a family of 5 brothers. And the thing is that Claire Kingsley's husband, David, died while she was writing this book. And so obviously this book went on hold because who the fuck cares about putting a book out when the love of your life has died? She's only in her 40s. They have 3 beautiful children together. I'm going to try not to bawl too much when I do this, just warning you. And I'd already known that, like, he had passed because when her husband died, you know, a lot of us in the romance community, we were buying her books to support her through this because that's what we can do. You know, our opinions and our, like, thoughts and prayers, they only go so far. Not that they're not important. And when people say that thoughts and prayers are useless, I say fuck off to that, because when you've lost someone, you don't necessarily want that person, like, telling you, like, what can I do for you, because they can't. But it is important if you say thoughts and prayers that you actually mean it. But anyway, that's for another day. I know people want to rail at people for, you know, when there's big earth-shattering things happening, you're like, all you're going to do is think and pray. I'm like, well, what are we going to do? Not every person can have a substantial impact for every person's situation, but we can support them how we can. One of those ways was to read their books. So my friend Jessin specifically had read some of her books before, and she really made an effort to get into all of her books. And so I had read, I think, Unraveling Him. Yes, I had read Unraveling Him with her for her book club because Juliet was going to be gone. So I read this book with her, and it was about one of the brothers, and I loved it. And I ended up reading 3, 4, and 5, which were out already. And what I love about her books is they're this small town feel. The family is so great. And they were very sexy for being contemporaries, you know, and they had, like, anal stuff happening, and they had, like, toys and, like, kinky things that you just don't get to read in, like, a fun, romantic comedy, because there was like comedy in these, and there was also this overarching mystery. So the Baileys are feuding with the Havens in this small town of Tillicum, and the whole town is in on it, and the whole town has sides, and this is a feud that's went on for 100 years. And we see different aspects of this throughout the series. And then we get to this book, and this is about Levi Bailey. He is a twin. Logan is his twin. And he has secretly been friends with Annika Haven since they were in high school. And they used to text each other in high school. And then she went to college and she had a baby. She has a 2-year-old son. And that relationship didn't work out. And when she came back home, Levi saw her around and he started texting her. He was like, "Is this still your number?" And they've been texting for like a year. And recently, well, probably not super recently, like Levi has been more and more, he wishes they could be together. But because of this stupid feud, which both of them feel is stupid, it's always just been pranks. But lately things have escalated. And he's like, this is so dumb. Like, I want to be with this woman. I want to be in her life. And they're both very like hesitant about it. But this book, especially like the beginning of it, is Levi deciding, fuck it. Why am I letting this feud that there's no end in sight keep me from being with this woman that I know is right for me? Like, I know she's right for me. And he's gonna go for it. And this book, I will tell you, it's not my favorite one in this series, okay? The ones previous of it definitely were. And there is an author's note, a note to the readers at the end of this book. It is not in the ebook currently. Currently, I mean, there's acknowledgments, but there is this Dear Reader letter that so far is only in the paperback. So I'm just saying, if you love her books, you might want this. Where she talks about how hard it was to pick this book back up. And if she didn't know if she could write a love story now that she had lost hers. Whew, nope, it's happening. So, there were parts of this book that were not as luscious and steamy and as wonderful as I felt before. It was lackluster in some things, but in other ways, it was still the same warm hug that I was wanting. And the last like couple chapters of this book and the epilogue of this book like brought my feelings all the way back up to warm and fuzzy when it was over. There were a lot of things she had to wrap up, and in the Dear Reader part, she does explain, she's like, I knew what like the ending of this series was. I knew what the big mystery was about, like why the feud was happening, but I didn't know the details or the clues that were going to lead us to it to give to a reader. And that's the part where like I can see that, because some things were really rushed. Some things I'm like, that doesn't make sense. But I wasn't reading this book for a huge mystery. I was reading it for the romance. And the romance part of it is a little bit of what I was missing, but not in how Levi loves Annika. And he has some of the swooniest things he says to her. And it was still so beautiful. So if you've read the other books by her, you definitely should read this. I put in my review of this book, because I did write like a full review for this book, even though I didn't have an arc of it. I still recommend this series if you love small town romance, if you love Melanie Harlow, if you love big families. I still recommend this so much. This does not diminish my love for it at all. And in fact, I left this book feeling so proud of Claire and so humbled that she was able to go back to her books and give us this ending. And she does set up, she is going to write a series about the Havens. And so there was a little like redeeming of some people that needed to be done. And there's still some more that could be done. Justin and I were talking, and there's for sure, there's 2 of the Haven brothers that I would read a book about them tomorrow. I would read it. And then the rest of them, I'm kind of like, you guys are assholes. I need to warm up to you a little bit. But I am reading them through the prism of Levi's eyes, you know? So there's that. But I gave this book 5 stars. This one was really only like, well, I gave it a 3 on the spice scale because there was some like spanking and some of that, but generally, like, there wasn't a lot of sex in this book, where some of her other books have more. But again, that's not the point. This book still made me so happy, and so I gave it a 5-star because I'm so happy that it exists. I really wanted to give it 6 stars, and those few little things just kind of kept it from that. But I highly recommend the Bailey Brothers series. I can't wait to own all of them. I'm going to get them, but I loved this. And then the last book that I read, which I'll try not to talk about too much because I talk about it all the time. I did another reread, and I reread Carnal Urges. I know. I reread this all the damn time. But I reread it for 2 reasons. One, well, actually 3 reasons. One, both Jessica from Peace Love Books and Tori from Novel Life read this book recently, and they both loved it so much, which just made me so happy because if you don't know, this was my favorite book in 2021. Favorite book of 2021. And so when my friends read it, I'm always like biting my nails. I'm super nervous how they're going to feel about it because it is pretty extra. Okay, it's pretty extra. But they both loved it, and I was just like talking about it with them. I was like, oh, I want to reread it. Also, JT Geissinger is going to be on my channel, which if you're watching this the day the video goes up, she's going to be on my channel tonight, which is March 13th. So excited. She's going to be on my channel, and so I wanted to reread this one and just experience it again. And then number 3, my friend Bree from In Love and Words, she has an Etsy shop, and she makes these awesome stickers. And some of them are just fun. Like I have some of them on my book cart, which you can just barely see in the corner. And then she also makes planner stickers, which I use for my bookish planners. And then she also had started making these annotation stickers. Let me see if I can find a good one. Where they say like fun different like things. So like here I used a couple. They say like OMG and swoon and like I hate this, like all these things. And I had already like annotated this book when I reread it in December, and I wanted to do it again and put the stickers in it. And I also added even more like annotations. So like here's one, like I put all these little stickers in it. So that was the 3rd reason, is I wanted to annotate. This book is literally like one of my roughest looking books, because normally when I buy a physical copy of a book, it's so for display. Like I don't mind annotating my books at all. Like I love marking them up. But I usually don't reread a book this many times. Like The Takeover and this one and Sea of Ruin are probably the ones I've reread the most. But literally I have like cracked spine, which does not normally happen in my books, but I don't care. A well-loved book, I have no problem well-loving a book and marking it up. I just don't usually get the time to do it. So this book is a age gap. It's a kidnapping. It's 2 alphas. Like our heroine, she is an alpha female, and our hero, he's an alpha male. He's in his 40s. She's in her 20s. She's a sassy, spicy, over-the-top woman. She is not my type at all. Not at all. But she works for me in such a way because she has such heart behind her. Like, she is this bonkers crazy lady. But people just, like, fall at her feet because she has this way of giving you her attention where you just want her to love you. And Declan is watching this happen. Like, his soldiers falling at her feet and all these things. And he can't help but be swept up by her, and I just love it. So this is a 6-star book for me. This is a 4.5 on the spice scale. We are up there, and I adore it, and so it was just a comfort read for me. Also, as I previously mentioned, I knew I was going to be getting The Savage like any time, and so I chose to like reread a book that I've already read in case I had to like stop it where I was. And I finished that book, and not even an hour later, I got The Savage. So tune in next week to see how I felt about The Savage, which comes out on the 16th. So there we go. That is everything. I only had 11 books to talk about, and I still managed to talk for almost an hour. That's what we're here for. Interruption by my father and all. So thank you so much for watching this video. Please make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me. We are working our way up to 15K. That is crazy. That was my end of the year goal of this year, and we're going to get there. It's amazing. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.